This is the Jump Around with Jim Rutledge, outfitted by Iron Jock, streaming live on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel.
This is the Jump Around 3.0. We are presented by Iron Jock, outfitted by Iron Jock. Use the promo code ESPN30 for 30% off all purchases over $50 at ironjock.com. That's Iron Jock with a C, ironjock.com. Hope everyone took advantage of their Black Friday sale. And, man, Black Friday was a Black Friday for Badger fans. That was the Minnesota game. My days are all sorts of off, but I'll share my story here for going to the Badger game. I was lukewarm on going. But shout out to my friend Nestor Rodriguez from Carbon World Health. He got me up into a suite for the game. And so I was like, you know what? I can brave the elements in a suite for the Wisconsin Badgers, and we can have a conversation about what's going on with this team and kind of hopefully enjoy a Badgers victory. That was my thought going into it. It was ugly quick. The conversations in that suite, which are people of influence in there, were what is Fickell's buyout? These were not questions from Nestor. These, what can they do at OC? How bad is this program? Is this the worst it's been since Barry Alvarez arrived, or since before Barry Alvarez arrived? Lots of questions from the suite up at Camp Randall. I put some photos out on my Blue Sky account, Jim Rutledge, on Blue Sky. There, you can find me there, or on Threads. I put the photos up there as well, and I think on YouTube you can find me, Jim Rutledge. Basically, search that ESPN, and you'll find me, and you'll find some of the videos from there. And it was a lot of empty stadium, Ryan. By 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, fans were flocking to the doors. It was empty by the time the Badgers lost and the axe was being chopped down, except for Gopher fans. It was a sad state for the program. And I remember part of the reason, and Luke Fickell's not in danger here, but part of the reason that Paul Chryst got let go, a major reason was it, in my opinion, was apathy. Fans were whatever about the team. And at the end of this season, I would say fans are whatever. I talked to someone else who's involved in supporting the Badger program, and they said, I'm not even mad. I'm just glad it's over. Like, they just want to move on from what this season was. So I'll start with that question to you, Ryan, because there's nothing. I don't even want to talk about the game. It sucked.
I got the stats there if we want to roll through them.
I saw them. I looked down. The whole thing is just crap. The whole thing is like the whole season is just like, I don't care. I don't care what happened. We'll get to some of the players leaving here in a minute. There's a decent amount of guys leaving, so who knows what this team will look like. The players that played in that game, will they matter? I'm not concerned about the transfers anymore. No disrespect to the players. But at this point, you're going to bring new guys in.
It's the nature of college football now.
At first, it was shocking. Now it's like, whatever. Leon Lowry in, Leon Lowry out.
Quickly.
He did have something to say that was interesting I want to get to. But your thoughts at the end of that Minnesota game and the season as a whole under Luke Fickell?
I think, like you said, the fact that it was just finally over was, I think I actually tweeted out during the game, I'm like, I'm glad we got it out of the way on a Friday. That way we didn't have to waste our Saturdays with it as well. Knock out the Packers on Thursday, Badgers on Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday free.
Right.
And it felt like you were kind of finally free from Badgers football this year. Never felt like they even had a chance in the game. Going 0-3 against the rivals was horrible.
Yeah.
Was the slowest 5-game death I've ever felt in my life as a sports fan. And to think that, like you said, I mean, I was up in the press box for this game, so I had a great view of watching all the Badgers fans leave the stadium in the fourth quarter.
A similar view to mine, just opposite of me.
Exactly.
Yep.
And throughout the game, like, I just kept thinking, think if you told somebody this during the third quarter of the Oregon game, that this would be what it's like in Camp Randall, about to lose the bowl streak for 23rd year in a row, and the fact that the Badgers would be destroyed in all 3 rivalry games, and then finally losing in the Axe game, which I think we didn't have great vibes going in, but the fact that, like, once it finally set in, it was not even surreal because you could believe it, but it's still hard to tell yourself that this is what actually happened.
Yeah, the Axe game wasn't competitive either.
No.
I won't name the Badgers, but there was a minimum of 4 former Badgers of different eras that I was texting, actually 5 of different eras. I was texting through the game, and it's not like a brag thing, but they all just had the same infuriated part. And I want to hear Barry Alvarez talking about really bothering him that they lost the bowl streak. It wasn't a bowl streak. It was looking that bad and that uninspired in their last 3 games against 3 teams that are rivals, especially your biggest rival. That's what stuck with the players, was that this team looked flat against Nebraska, it looked flat against Iowa, and it looked flat against Minnesota. They finished the season flat. It's a similar, me as a Bears fan, when Washington, the Badgers, or the Bears let the Commanders loss basically end their season and get their coach fired. Coach Fickell's not going anywhere. I think that Oregon game, and maybe there's something that'll come out with Phil Longo, I think that lost the season for the Badgers. The defense had no more fight in them. The offense was always incompetent, and it just seemed like nobody showed up. But Coach Alvarez, who's a part of ESPN Wisconsin now, was on the Great Dane Huddle last night, and he talked about the losing streak, or the winning streak for the Bulls ending.
We worked so hard because really when I took the job, we'd only been to 5 bowls in the history of the school. And won 1 minor bowl game. And all of a sudden, we've got 20-some in a row. And to allow that to slide and go away is hurtful. It really bothers me. It really did.
And I think it should bother him. It is one of those streaks. It's just like the Badgers NCAA tournament streak. It's embarrassing that it ends. There's no reason it needed to be ending. This team should have gotten 6 wins this year, even with Braden Locke, who looks borderline incompetent running this offense. I'm not saying he's can't run an offense, but the air raid offense where he's required to be the key that unlocks the whole thing, the key is snapped off in the lock with Braden Locke. It ain't going to work. So everyone knows that Braden Locke is not the one to unlock this offense. I don't know if they're going to run this offense, but I don't think they're going to, and we can get into that in a minute. But the overall state of this program under Luke Fickell, they're 12-13 in 8-10 in Big Ten games, and Fickell has a lot to, and we're going to hear from him. He had a response. Jim Polzin and him went back and forth again, and I want to hear that. But there is truth with the idea, and I think he said this before, and I do want to get this out of the way. This isn't Paul Chryst or Brett Bielema's Big Ten. You can't just roll your helmet out there and get bowl eligible. And let's be honest, that was the case. I do want to talk about adjusted expectations. I'll just put this out here now. My expectations for the Badgers, no matter who is the coach, whether it was Jim Leonhard, Lance Leipold, or Luke Fickell, some names that were floated in the past, I think 8 wins is the new 10 wins, and then every couple years you have an opportunity to make that playoff run. So 8 wins is kind of that bare minimum where we're like, hey, this feels like we are a good football team. We got 8 wins every year. I think with the NIL, it's going to change a lot of things, and I think teams are going to pop up. They're going to surprise you. Getting 10 wins over and over again feels like a big lift. I think 8 wins all the time, and then once every 3 to 4 years at the latest, making a run for the playoff, depending on the group you have. But with all the turnover, too, you could have a great team and players go pro, or they leave the program, and so it's hard to maintain that year in and year out. Mm-hmm. But I think 8 wins and getting to a playoff every couple of years is what I'm looking for that new standard for this program. I think it's fair, because 12 teams, I think a playoff pop every couple of years is worthwhile, is fair to say, too.
8 would put you on the edge of possibly being able to get in.
That's
if the Big Ten's really good and you get 9 wins, I mean, that's essentially what 3 different SEC teams are on that doorstep right now. And if you think about it, if you're a 10-win team, 10-win a season team, that's what Ohio State is right now. It's what Indiana was able to do in 1 year, and maybe they won't do that again next year. I highly doubt they will, but that's where Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State are at right now. Michigan will probably be back there soon. That's the tippy top of the conference.
Yes, and I think that should be our expectation. 8 is the new 10. Mm-hmm. And so if we get 7, but it's a respectable 7, but then you're normally getting 8 and then you get a playoff pop, great. Depending on their schedule. This year, if they got 8, if they get 8 next year, I'm throwing them a damn parade.
If they get 8 next year?
Yeah, that's a hell of a schedule. But again, it's not impossible. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but this year, if you just knocked out combination of the games you would be picked to win in and 50-50 games, and then it's pulling off 2 quote-unquote upsets. But realistically, I mean, Minnesota, and they beat you. Minnesota beat USC. USC was not some impossible to beat team. Obviously, Oregon and Penn State, like you gave them a run for their money, and Alabama, maybe you could have pulled those off. But if you had pulled off the wins that you had, plus Iowa, Nebraska, and Minnesota at a bare minimum should be coin flip games every year.
They should be competitive.
Yes,
certainly.
Right, exactly. So just this year, 5 wins, you flip those 3, you have 8. So, I mean, like, that's all I'm looking for. I do want to get to the portal, but first I want to hear from Luke Fickell talking with Jim Polzin.
Luke, what's your message to fans right now? Me?
Yeah, I've talked to the players. I told the players.
Fans are concerned about the direction of this program. What would you tell them right now?
Those, just like I told the players, those that stay will be a champion. And you got to have people that believe in you. And, I know it's hard. Having faith is, things you can't see. And right now, I'm sure they can't see it either. And that's the tough part. But, they got to believe. And they're going to have to, obviously, seeing is believing. And I don't worry as much about them as I worry about those guys in that locker room. Our job to get them to believe is to put the product on the field. And right now, we don't have that opportunity. And we haven't done it. So I would understand if they, are worried. It's their prerogative. And our job is to prove it. And we haven't done that, but we will.
Luke Fickell does need to work on his messaging. He seems defensive. It's a fine line that Coach Alvarez walked. Bielema didn't. I mean, Bielema had the same problem. When things didn't go wrong for Brett Bielema, he got kind of ornery, like Luke Fickell is there, and defensive. And it was off-putting. I think it hurt his brand as a coach. Coach Alvarez was able to walk that line of even when things were bad, it was still, he's arrogant, but in a way that it comes across as confident and it's not condescending often. I'm not saying Alvarez was a saint to cover. I didn't cover the team then. But just the way that he talks, the way that he carries himself, it's more of that. This is more defensive. And we've seen Coach LaFleur do this with the Packers. Lots of coaches do this. Paul Chryst avoided it by just being a mushmouth throughout. And so, you just never really knew when he was happy or sad or on his heels. He just didn't give it to you. Bielema, it was defensive. Gary Anderson, I actually have a hard time remembering exactly what he was.
Gary Anderson, very forgettable all around.
Yeah, but he did bring the 3-4 here. So I will give him that. So I want to get to I don't even care about his thoughts on the bowl game. So I want to move on past that. I want to get to this transfer portal stuff in a minute. But first, let me tell you about winners, because we're not talking about winners right now with Wisconsin Badgers. But winners go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. Over $1 million won last week in alone at Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. Go be a winner and go to Ho Chunk Gaming Madison. I want to get to the portal here, and we'll also kind of tie this to the OCs, because what is coming up tomorrow is the early signing day, which I'm not a big recruit guy anymore, but my understanding is that this new early signing day is kind of, for all intents and purposes, signing day. Like it used to be February, or February was the big one, but now it's kind of, this is when it happens.
It's very similar to how college admissions are now, where there's a early enrollment, and if you get into college, you probably got in that early enrollment.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is for football now too.
So so tomorrow's a big day. The job opening for the Badgers offensive coordinator closes tonight. So I would imagine today, that's Pablo Iglesias gave me that news, teammate of ours.
No, I believe he's correct.
With him on it. You gave me a look. I'm running with him on it.
I'm trying to remember exactly when I think it dropped last Tuesday, right? And state law says it has to be open for a week, I believe.
Okay, so
that makes sense.
Yes, and I did this before with Fickell. Then so I would imagine, we have Jim, Matt, and Molly coming up. I could imagine that during that show today, 4 to 6 or 4 to 5:30 on ESPN Madison today, because of the Bucs game, that we could have news coming during that show.
I would be shocked, honestly.
They have their guy.
I think they do. I think it's just now it's a waiting game of when they're able to announce it. And
they're not going to announce it till Wednesday because state law.
I don't think it's leaked, because if it's somebody who's from a program who's still currently playing or going to be in the playoffs or going to be playing in a conference championship, I think those coaches don't want that news coming out either.
I think I overestimate. You're right. I don't think the coaches are going to leak it, but the players coming in, being recruited tomorrow.
Or somebody's dad.
Or someone's dad, no. And so, that's the thing. It will get out. Now, the Badgers can have plausible deniability of like, we're not going to leak it and we're not going to announce it, but it's going to leak. It's going to leak from someone's going to be able to nail down.
It didn't
a source.
leak before Phil Longo got hired.
That's true, but there was like it started getting a little bit of a brush fire to it, Phil, and that's what I'm saying. It's going to start coming. There's going to be a brush fire, and again, the timing of the recruiting like signing day.
Yeah.
The players know. There's no way that many players know with this many people covering recruiting that are not going to get that information, and then you'll start seeing the wildfire on Reddit of like the same name over and over again. That's why I've been pulling these transfers from. I've been able to get these transfers because, one, X is a dumpster fire, and Wisconsin Badgers Reddit, they obviously just pull the info off of the dumpster fire that is X. So now I can just go to Reddit and pull it off there. I'm not going off someone reporting on Reddit. It's more of they are aggregating it for me off the Badger feed there. It's been helpful.
I don't know. Is there an ESPN Reddit? Maybe we should have our own ESPN Madison one.
Maybe we should. We've popped up there a few times. Maybe our interview with Soup Campbell will pop up there today. So the names that I've seen that have left the program, and this is no disrespect to them, it's more that I just don't get worked up so far over anyone leaving. Cole DeCrew, who was recruited under the previous administration, redshirt freshman quarterback. Not surprising. I was honestly surprised he stayed around last year. Then you have Amari Snowden, which is a surprise to me. He was a 4-star recruit at Cincinnati, then came to Wisconsin. I don't know if he was a portal or a decommit and commit. I don't know.
He decommitted before actually enrolling in Cincinnati. He essentially came with Luke Fickell, but he wasn't actually a transfer.
And he hasn't, and again, at Wisconsin didn't make a big impact. But there's two parts to this, because I think he would have. Leon Lowry left, and I want to get to Leon Lowry's choice of words when he left. Jonas Duclona, I think that's how you say his name. Another cornerback has left. He was a Cincinnati guy that came here, and then you have Justin Taylor, a defensive end. Then you have Kurt Neal, a defensive lineman, defensive starter, really. And then you had Jace Arnold has popped up to another player, another cornerback entering the portal. But Leon Lowry, and I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't have the full quote in front of me, but I believe this was with The Athletic. He, in an exit interview with them, a little series they do on there, he mentioned that there was basically he was asked to put his hand in if he was going to come back this year, he was not going to be the linebacker they recruited him to be. He was going to be a hand in the ground type edge rusher sort of thing. And that would indicate, I don't think Tressel's going anywhere, but could the scheme change some? I could see that happening. Because what are they, and I know there's a lot of hemming and hawing about this Badgers defense, and the last I looked, the set that they showed up the most in was actually a set that Jim Leonhard ran a lot at Wisconsin, so it's not like the Badgers are reinventing the wheel here. But what would you say is the quote-unquote base defense for Coach Tressel?
It's definitely more of that 3-3 style, where it's 3 down linemen who are there to take on blocks, and then you have 3 off-ball linebackers who are able to move and get all the tackles, and then you have a lot of defensive backs. And a lot of guys who are hybrid defensive back, linebacker types. So it's 3-4, 3-3-ish.
Before we get to the offensive coordinator, where do you think this, reading the tea leaves here, because I have an idea of what this is going to mold more into. I don't think it's going to mold to a 4-3. I don't think a 4 front. I don't think that would be the case.
No.
But I could see more of a 3-4 with that many cornerbacks leaving, and I could see Lowry being asked to be more of because sometimes in the 3-4 you are going to put your hand in the ground as an edge rusher.
For sure.
And so the 3-4 is the quote-unquote base. You're still going to see these sorts of things, but and I'm not saying that these players wouldn't leave for other reasons, but if this defense is going from a defense that would have, 4 corners on the field at all times?
Yeah, would have 5 on
all times.
Well, 5 DBs, yes.
Yeah, 5 DBs on the field at all times to likely having 4. I think it's a slight difference there. I mean, again, nickel and all. There's a lot of things out there, but I would imagine that if they are changing the defense slightly, and the 3-4 we saw did work at Wisconsin, it has worked stopping the run and some other things there. That could be a slight modification, because I believe Tressel's kind of run both. That I think that could be a slight modification in recruiting. And with the portal, that would allow you
I
to
think
make those
overall,
changes quickly.
the overall defensive philosophy is going to remain the same, whether it's 3-4 or 3-3.
I agree with you, but it could be a slight changes in recruiting. Do you get a little more stout on the inside?
I
Do you
don't.
get a linebacker sort of
I
stuff?
think for the most part, if you have guys who are lining up on the D line, if you're a guy who has his hand in the ground, it shouldn't matter too much necessarily what the philosophy or what the scheme is per se.
I agree.
It's the fact that they're always going to have 6 to 7 guys in the box.
Yep.
Or sort of on the front 7, shall you say?
Yes, it's the size of those guys.
And that's going to fluctuate from game to game more than anything. I think
for sure.
I think that's the thing about the defense is you have to always consider that if you're playing Iowa, now you're going to have 4 linebackers out there. You might have 4 D linemen.
Yes.
Whereas if you're playing Purdue or whatever Purdue might be, that's when you'll have those 5 to even 6 D-backs on the field.
And I think, and you're right on that. That's why I kind of said that there was a whole hullabaloo about this defense. And then if you looked at it, Leonard's last year at Wisconsin, almost the exact same formations to what Tressel ran here at Wisconsin for most of the year. So when you actually get into, you're not really in your base that much. It's the same thing in the NFL with the 3-4, 4-3, and the nickel, dime, all that. But I do wonder if there's going to be a recruiting focus on, not a ton, but a few more players that can defend Iowa or Nebraska.
I think so.
And that's, however you want to call it, scheme change, or at least being able to actually scheme change with bodies that actually can physically execute the scheme in those games when you play Iowa, a few more big bodies.
Where do you think that comes from? Or who do you think is pushing that change? Do you think that's Tressel or do you think that would be Fickell? Because I have a feeling that would be Fickell.
I think it's Fickell, but I don't think Tressel, and I can't remember his whole history, but I believe, obviously, Ohio State, I think they run a little bit more of a defense that's similar to what we're talking about. You have to have the ability as a defense to be flexible, and I think a few more recruits that fit. I think they got caught up in like USC's coming and UCLA and Oregon, and you're right, but they also need guys to defend against the traditional teams in the Big Ten.
I will say there's a similar exit interview with defensive tackle Kurt Neal, who entered the portal today. And as you mentioned, he was one of the more significant losses because he was a defensive starter who many believe he was one of their better D linemen by the end of the year. And he even mentioned that he felt like he didn't like playing in this defense anymore because it is a D line where your really only job is to fill gaps and to let linebackers make most of the plays. It's funny because Mike Tressel always mentions the idea of not wanting football players, but football players. He, even in his exit interview with Jesse Temple at The Athletic, mentioned the idea of not wanting to be a football player, and that's what he felt like he was having to do. And I wonder if that's more because of, like you're mentioning, changing a little bit the philosophy of like, hey, we need to just be able to stop the run right now because we're being gashed over these final 3 to 4 weeks. And he even mentioned, did you think it was more on the coaching staff or the players down the stretch? And he said, it definitely wasn't on the players if you watch the film. And he said that's something he made known in those final 3 to 4 weeks. And it makes me wonder if some of those changes, especially when you look back at this season, how much that affected them on that side of the ball. And maybe that's why the deterioration came along.
Yes, him saying it's not on the players immediately raised a red flag to me that some of it was on the players, though. I mean, like, if you're saying it's not on the players, then to me it says the players have stopped buying in on the coaches.
It's defensive the same way Luke Fickell is being defensive.
Right, but it goes to, that sounds like guys who are not bought in. Not quitters, but they're not bought in, and if you're not bought in, it's just a different level of who cares if we go out and get our asses kicked against Minnesota. Like, I'm out of here anyways.
Yeah.
And I'm not faulting him I'm just saying that answer right there tells me that, again, there's the mirror between the two teams that I follow the most of Chicago and Wisconsin is intense. But it is one of those things where if they're just not bought in, it's just not the same.
Do you find it interesting that most of these transfers and most of this sentiment is coming from defensive players so far? I mean, of the 7 transfers now, 6 of them are defensive.
I can see the defense being, like, the offense is too bad to be disgruntled. Like you don't have the right to be upset because you look so inept.
Fair.
Defensively, they had every right because in multiple games this year, they played well defensively enough to win those games, and I think that starts to breed contempt. Like Kurt Neal, like I think of his complaint, and we used to have Keanu Benton on Jim Matt and Molly. That's the nose in a 3-4. Like if you go to the NFL, it's a non-glory position. So you do have to eat up, or even in a 4-3. You listen to a cover 2, you talk about it. The D tackles have to eat up linemen or eat up offensive linemen so the linebackers can be free to make a play on the running back or possibly blitz. Same thing in a 3-4. Those D tackles, Yeah, you get a little bit once in a while an opportunity to truly pass rush, but those D tackles in most schemes are just there to be big bodies, to eat up linemen so the other players can make plays, but that's how you get to the NFL. That's how Keanu Benton got to the NFL. So, like, I don't love that complaint about it because that feels like a defense in general, but it does speak to a disconnect, and I think the players stopped buying in on the coaching staff. So to the coaching staff, and we're going to be joined by Lamar Soup Campbell coming up in a couple minutes here, former Badger. He's been a part of the program as a player and was part of the staff for a little bit as well, and has been a part of the NFL with the Chicago Bears and now the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to get to him in a minute. Offensive coordinator. The names I don't need you to get bogged down into. We can talk about one name here, and we'll throw out a few others. Here's what I don't want. I never want to see the air raid offense at Wisconsin again. I'm going to give Fickell a pass and say maybe he got caught up in the name Phil Longo and thought, I need recruiting here. Phil Longo's a great recruiter. And whatever offense he runs, like, look at it's balanced. Like, look at what they did with Drake May in their running game. It's balanced, and he sold himself. And maybe it's one of these things that just don't work. Of a friend kind of knows someone, and this is honestly my biggest red flag with Fickell right now. And defensively, he had his coaches, and again, we'll have to see how the defense had far more moments of looking good this year than the offense did. But when you don't hire someone that's not on your staff, like Barry talked about this, like when you don't have your guys, that makes me nervous. Again, even the parallels between Chicago and Wisconsin. Chicago, Eberflus hires Shane Waldron. They didn't have some relationship ahead of time. Like, good coaches have other coaches lined up ready to go. And I hope Fickell has someone lined up ready to go. But there's been some names thrown out there with, what was his name? Brennan Marion. Brennan Marion from UNLV runs this go-go offense. Essentially, Cliff Notes, this is a great article. You can find it. I put it on my Twitter. You can follow the link to it. But the go-go offense is, I think the quote that would get Badger fans excited is that we're going to run it down your throat and throw it over your head. Triple option offense. You don't need a super elite runner in this offense, but he's a former receiver at Tulsa under Gus Malzahn, so he's going to try to throw the ball. I think they threw for like over 3,500 yards and ran for 2,500 yards this year. So it's an offense that can be electric, but also fit to what Wisconsin does well. But in general, Ryan, forget names. What do you want to see philosophy-wise for the offense?
I think I want to see an offense that plays to win games more than anything, because overall with Fickell, I think this is a team that's going to be built around defense.
Okay.
So I want more. I mean, I'm not saying they have to be back to what Paul Chryst was, with a ground and pound control the clock type team.
Yep.
But it's a team where I more so want to see that you can control games and you can control other teams with a physical brand of football that maybe you're not getting a lot of over-the-top explosive plays, but if you get 3 or 4 a game, that's all you need in order to win, because the defense is going to be so good.
Complimentary football.
Complimentary for sure, but I think I still want it to lean more into these strengths and, be complimentary with what the defense is trying to do as well. Because that's a big problem with the air raid. So there's no such thing as complimentary football with the air raid.
No. Honestly, it just felt like a bunch of guys out there like playing a video game, accumulating some stats. It just
Yes.
never had a flow to it. And I'm never one that says you can't run it at Wisconsin, but if you're going to run the air raid and the quarterback's the most important part, then you have to have multiple quarterbacks lined up. You can't just have one guy and then if he goes, you're cooked. Like that to me is unforgivable. Like, you knew last year that Braden Locke couldn't run this, so then what are we going to do this year? Like, that's concerning. But power spread, what Notre Dame runs, what Ohio State runs, this go-go offense from Marion is interesting, but something that leans into the power of Wisconsin, leans into the recruiting of Wisconsin with the linemen. It's very much like how the Badgers, I thought, switching to the 3-4 defensively. And again, this is close enough to it where you take those running backs in Wisconsin and you make them linebackers. They're not athletic enough to be running backs in the NFL. A lot of the running backs from the state of Wisconsin in these smaller schools, but they are athletic enough to be linebackers. Like Zach Bond, I believe, was a quarterback and running back in high school. Like those sorts of players. That's what I want to see more of. But on the offensive line, get those linemen. And then you can find the running backs, whether, Melvin Gordon, obviously from Wisconsin. You can find other running backs that can be the ones to be explosive. And you don't need 5 good wide receivers. To your point, you need 3. And then that would set it up. But we're going to get to Lamar Soup Campbell in a minute. Let me tell you about Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb. I actually saw Tyler out there yesterday. He was driving a Silverado. It was like an E-Silverado. And you've heard me on here a lot kind of dunk on how dumb the Cybertrucks look. This is actually a truck that is actually does truck things. It's so I saw the 2024 RST model of the Silverado EV, and it is. I mean this pun on purpose, but it is electric. It is amazing. I saw him pull up actually out in front of Buck and Honey's in Mount Horeb, and I was like, "What is that?" And he showed me it's got a glass, like a all glass ceiling tinted, so you get this natural light coming in. It is a pretty awesome look. So go check that out. They have, I think, 4 currently. This is a pretty exclusive model here. They have 4 of them out at Simden Chevy in Mount Horeb. We'll take a break here, and we'll hear from Lamar Soup Campbell next.
Staying on top of our game is one of the hardest things to do. At Game Day Men's Health, we specialize in testosterone replacement therapy, weight loss, erectile dysfunction, and wellness. Proven to increase energy, build muscle, improve mood, and boost sex drive. Get started now and book your free consultation and testing. You'll get test results back in minutes, and we'll create a plan to optimize your health. Game Day Men's Health. Book your free consultation today.
We are now joined by Lamar Soup Campbell, former Badger player, former Badger staff member, has been with the Chicago Bears, and now with the Seattle Seahawks. Soup, great to see you. You were part of the show the first time around with the Jump Around.
Good to see you, JR. Happy to be back on, my guy. Yeah, man, you guys opened up the door for me and let an old retired guy come hang out with you guys for a little bit. But proud of the way you guys have grown the show. Obviously, you guys are doing a great job up there in Madison, man. I love to see you guys, bringing Barry back in, bringing the former players back in, and doing a great job of giving the Madison sports fans what they want to hear.
Before we get to your thoughts on the Badger football program, what are you up to now with Seattle? You've been out there for a couple of years. Kind of explain your situation, what you're doing with Seattle, and then you can talk about what you did with Wisconsin when you were here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my title here is Strategic Personnel Development. So what I do is I work on the scouting department, and what we do as we're scouting our players throughout the year. My area is the Pacific Northwest, so I have all the schools here. But as we continue to compile all of our information, my job is to take myself and my assistant general manager, we sit down and we do a strategic development on how these guys will not only fit in our system, but how we develop them. In the world of football, you have to win right now, so you want to hit on your draft picks. And you want to make sure you put them in a proper position, not only to grow as men, but as to grow as players on the field, to make sure we're taking advantage of our return on investment when we draft these guys.
And then with the Badgers, what were you doing when you were here as part of the staff?
Yeah, I was assistant AD of engagement while I was there in Wisconsin, worked very closely with the football staff, but all student athletes. So I was all over, spent a lot of time, believe it or not, over with the rowing team, the basketball team, women's soccer, women's volleyball. So I was pretty much, assistant AD of engagement for all sports. I really had a good insight. I think that was maybe one of my favorite times in my career, to be involved with so many different student athletes from so many different backgrounds. And I can only hope they learn from me as much as I learned from them during my time in Madison.
Every player that I've talked to that's been around you speaks very highly of you. I did want to ask, do you ever talk about your time in Wisconsin with John Schneider, obviously a Green Bay guy and everything, and obviously he was kind of born and raised in Wisconsin?
Yeah, it definitely comes up. God's a Green Bay guy, one of the best general managers, in the NFL, if not the best. I come in to work with a sponge every day. I've learned so much from him the last couple of years on how to build a roster, how to identify talent, and how to be a phenomenal leader. I've been lucky to be around some great leaders in my career, and John's another one of them, a great Wisconsin guy.
Paul Christ, Wisconsin guy, and I think this kind of was how Barry would describe his players, and honestly Badger players in general were, and you talk to people in the NFL, tough, smart, dependable is what Paul Christ wanted out of players. That was their reputation in the NFL. What do you think, and obviously it's only 2 years, but what do you think, there hasn't been a lot of Badgers coming into the NFL, but do the Badgers still kind of maintain that sort of lore with NFL groups when they kind of think about Badger football over the last few years? Is it still smart, tough, dependable?
I know that's definitely the standard for all the alumni there. I think when you look at one of the things that we had in Wisconsin, even when we were recruiting during my time there, is our ability to develop players. Look at all the walk-ons, that we have had that have grown into great NFL players. Look at all the guys that were probably underdrafted that are doing extremely well in the NFL right now, if not drafted at all. So I think what we were able to do was be a development program. I think with the state of where we are right now, we have some young guys, and you look at the recruiting, and you look at the high numbers of recruiting, which I think is phenomenal for our program. But it's similar to drafting. It doesn't matter where you drafted a guy, where you recruited a guy, or how many stars the player had. How do you develop them, and how does he help your football team at the end of the day? So the development is something I think that we need to continue to hang our hat on. In Madison, and I think that's something we took a lot of pride in when we were there in Wisconsin as well.
It is funny, I think, and we're talking with Lamar Soup Campbell, former Badger. I think every former Badger I talk to, whether it's Joe Thomas or Brad Nortman or Melvin Gordon or you, it's all about the development and growing these players, and it's something that they want Wisconsin to get back to. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot Wisconsin can live in here. Before we kind of get to the program going forward, this season as a whole for Badger fans, Badger alum, and actually, I would love to, and I'll give Ryan a second to load up Luke Fickell's answer. It was Jim Polzine, a Badger reporter, asking him about what would he say to fans. It wasn't the best one. He kind of didn't follow, and I think Barry's probably the best of this because I saw Brett Bielema flinch. Paul Chris was hard to read if he flinched because he always kind of gave you a very low-level answer. But it does seem a little bit like Luke Fickell flinching a little bit under the pressure because he was asked the question about fans specifically. So I wanted to get your thoughts on his reaction to it, and then kind of what fans should be expecting out of this Badger football program. But let's see Luke Fickell.
Luke, what's your message to fans right now? Me?
Yeah, I've talked to the players. I told the players.
Fans are concerned about the direction of this program. What would you tell them right now?
Those, just like I told the players, those that stay will be a champion. And you got to have people that believe in you. And, I know it's hard. Having faith is, things you can't see. And right now, I'm sure they can't see it either. And that's the tough part. But, they got to believe. And they're going to have to, obviously, seeing is believing. And I don't worry as much about them as I worry about those guys in that locker room. Our job to get them to believe is to put the product on the field. And right now, we don't have that opportunity, and we haven't done it. So I would understand if they, are worried. It's their prerogative. And our job is to prove it, and we haven't done that, but we will.
So, my silver lining to that is you can tell he's feeling a lot of pressure, which means he cares. This is not the guy that arrived here 2 years ago with a big smile on his face, like we're going to lift Badger football up. This is a guy who knows that he has to figure out what's going on with this program and do it quickly. Right.
I watched the interview, and I think emotions have calmed a little bit since I saw Minnesota come and take the axe. Yeah. On a Friday. But I think when you look at what Coach Fickell's response was, he was really talking to the locker room. I mean, let's be honest. The transfer portal opens up, I believe, next week.
There's 7 Badgers already, I believe we said.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I have it on my phone, so I get all the updates. So he's talking to his locker room. He's trying to show confidence to his locker room. And obviously, the early signing period, we know in college football, verbal commitments don't mean much these days, right? So I think, but I was taught, he who controls the mob controls Rome, right? You can't forget about the people that got you there. You can't forget about the fan base. I mean, I feel bad for the Badgers that were looking to go to a sunny state and drink them dry, because that's what we do during bowl games, go down and drink the bars dry. But I understand exactly what he wanted to say, but when you look at the world of college football now, it's such a business model. Everyone's involved, the coaches, your PR department, how you handle questions, all those things play a part in the overall success of the program. So I think when you hear what Coach Fickell meaning, studying Barry was a school of Hayden Fry. He was a school of Lou Holtz. Barry had a charisma, and he had a way of answering questions, and he was always himself. What I want to encourage Coach Fickell to do is continue to be himself, but also, continue to be honest with the fan base of where we are, what's expected. I mean, when you look at where we are as a program, any alumni, every Sunday we play a football game, and I always look for the Badgers on the other team. And it's not a good game. The first thing is always the state of our program. Every conversation, every Sunday we talk to these guys. So you never waste a crisis. I don't believe in wasting a crisis. So right now you have a situation where you have highly involved alumni that want to see the program do well. You have a fan base that has supported us for 30 plus years since Barry got there, that is 100% behind football department, and understanding the new economics of the game now, right? You have the house versus the NCAA. So now players will now be able to get paid next year. We have a $285 million facility. getting ready to go up as well. But if you build it, they got to come, but you have to have a winning program, right? For fans to come and support you. So I would just say to anyone, understanding that the fan base that we have is vital to the success of the program and the recruiting of every other sport in the University of Wisconsin system. Our volleyball team are champions, right? Our track and field team are national champions. Our women's hockey are national champions. Like, so you're talking about huge implications, not only financially, but Title IX implications. Don't lose the mob, don't lose the student body, and don't lose the fans, because that's what we thrive on. That's what made Wisconsin who we are. And let's be honest, when Barry and Pat and Donna took over, Ohio State was already Ohio State for 50 plus years. Michigan was already Michigan for 50 plus years. They were already national dominant. What Barry was able to do was give us a voice and give us an identity and give us a plan on how he wanted to build the program. And we did that with being also by being fiscally responsible with where we spend our money. So you take a step back, we're honest with ourselves. You build your staff determines your players' development, your players' development determines success on the field. Success on the field determines NIL donorship and sponsorship and support of the fan base. So I think we look at things that way. You know, you're going into year 3, the financial implications that are in front of us and the ability to recruit and develop, I think, are foundational for what we built at Wisconsin. And I think, to your point, there is no flinching. You know, I think you see the book behind me by Barry. I keep it up all the time for my players so they know where I stand. You know, they also know where I come from, and I learned a lot from Barry during my time in Wisconsin. I still carry those lessons. So I think when you look at where Luke is, you know, this is when you got to be at your best. This is when all of our badges got to be at our best. And like I said, never waste a crisis. You have an alumni that will support you in every way to make sure we get this program back on track.
I love that answer, and I wanted to ask you this because the Badger alumni group is interconnected, and there's a lot of conversations. You don't have to say who you've been talking to or that part of it, but when you run into players on the field or you're texting with them, what is what is the Cliff Notes version of how they're feeling about the program from former Badger players?
Well, I would say everybody that's watched Wisconsin die hard is the identity. We want us to get back to the identity of who we are. We definitely want to close the gates on the state of Wisconsin. You know, what we built. You know, when I see offensive linemen leaving the state, kind of pisses me off a little bit, you know, not being able to keep the homegrown talent. And, you know, when I was younger, I was hanging out with my dad, and I asked my dad for $5, JR. And he said, Dad, son, I don't have any money. And then we went back home, and my mom asked him for some money, and he gave her some money. I said, well, Dad, you know, you said you didn't have any money. He said, sometimes, son, you got to pay to play. And when you get older, you'll understand. So here we are. We are in play to play. We are grown now, and that's kind of where we are. But how we spend those dollars, where we invest those dollars, how we recruit, the people that we're paying, I think is huge. So it's nothing wrong. You don't by being progressive, we don't have to lose to the tradition of who we were at Wisconsin. You can actually do both. They're not mutually exclusive. So you can be progressive. We can recruit. We can do things differently. But a tradition of tough, smart, dependable, great defense, great offensive linemen, running back, serviceable quarterback. We're going to land on 3-star, 2-star wide receivers, but Chris Chambers did pretty well. Lee Evans did pretty well. I mean, we've been able to find stars at the skill positions by focusing on, you know, basically who we are. And I know we kick off, you know, August 30th, 2025, but in my mind, and a lot of the alumni mind, kickoff starts now. Kickoff starts now. Everything we do between now and August 30th, 2025, we're determined where we go as a program.
I want to get to maybe some, you know, what you'd like to see out of a new offensive coordinator, but I think to kind of give a good look, and I know you shared this story with me before about what Badger football was under Coach Alvarez and what they've kind of maintained over time. Talk about your recruitment with Coach Alvarez and why he stood out to you, because it's a very similar story that Ron Dane has told and other players have told, right. And it is one that I think stands out in a personal touch that I think that will always resonate.
Yeah, so I played 1 year of high school football my senior year, and we happened to be playing against the number one offensive lineman in the country, which was Floyd Winterburn. Ended up going to Penn State, ironically drafted here in Seattle. And everybody came there to see Floyd Winterburn. And I had a monster game that game. I think I had 2 touchdowns, maybe 2 interceptions, a lot of tackles. And after that week, my phone started ringing. Joe Paterno gave me a call. My mom hung up on him because she didn't know I could play. You know, nobody knew I could play. And I had been bussed out to a different school district for my senior year. So from the inner city, I was in a suburban school district. And Jim Huber, who was the offensive line coach at the time, was my direct recruiter. He would come and meet me. He would come out to the school. But when the final days of recruitment came, the only person that came to my neighborhood was a really bad neighborhood, a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, was Barry Alvarez. So Barry said he's coming to my house, and Barry pulls up to the corner, and all the drug dealers are outside, all the bad guys are outside, and like, oh, they thinking Barry wants something besides football, right? He's like, nah, I'm here for Soup. Oh, what school are you with? Wisconsin. And they kind of walked Barry up to the door, and they had the helicopter out looking for someone. And Barry comes in. He goes, oh, they weren't looking for you, were they, Soup? I was in, bro. Like, I shut down all my recruitment after that visit and decided to become a Badger, So for me, and think about it, you had on that visit, you had Bill Callahan, you had Brad Childers, staff members that would eventually go to the NFL. Brad actually is retired but became a head coach in the NFL, and Bill Callahan still turning out great offensive linemen down there in Tennessee. So when I talk about the staff of how you develop your people and the staff you have, how you develop your players, I think that's huge, but I think it speaks to the relationship of what it means to have a coach and a player dynamic. In the world of NIL and the world of development, if you cannot connect with your player, they will not perform with you at the highest level. You have to know who the player is, you have to know who the man is, and everything will take care of itself after that. I truly believe that.
Talking with former Badger Lamar Soup Campbell on the jump around. With that, Wisconsin, you touched on earlier, would probably become even more important than it's ever been, because you think of like Hunter Wohler and Jack Nelson, two Wisconsin kids who probably could have been poached if they wanted to. Right. I'm sure they had offers. They stayed. Wisconsin means something to them. And I know Chris Orr's talked about how, like, hey, he's from Texas and Wisconsin means as much to him as anyone else. And I do believe him when he says that. And I'm sure Wisconsin does as well. But that took time to build, as opposed, year 1, 2, 3, as you're part of that program, the roots get stronger, the pride gets stronger. Right. When you have someone who's born and raised in Wisconsin, it can help make sure that they're not getting picked off for an extra $25,000, that they will stay, and I think that part you mentioned earlier, in-state recruiting is going to even matter more, I think, in this NIL era.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things to do when I was on campus is I was afforded the opportunity to get in front of recruits and be able to speak to them about what it means to be a Wisconsin Badger. I consider myself a son of the university. Everything that I believe I achieved outside of my family's help was really springboarded by the University of Wisconsin, whether it was from the football staff. And let me get a shout out to the School of Education on Bascom Hill, whether it was the academics, they set me on a path to be successful and have an opportunity to do different things. And at the time, we would be honest with ourselves that Wisconsin wasn't for everybody. You were going to work for it. You were going to be an underdog. You were going to have to get up at 5:30 a.m. with John Detman and run the stadium stairs. You're going to have to do things differently. You were going to have to move differently. And our program wasn't for everyone. And we were honest with everyone coming in the door. But when those guys came into the program, we bought into something larger than ourselves. And when you buy into something larger than yourself, which is something I continue to look for now as a scout, will this guy buy into something larger than himself? If you're a starter on a college, but I need you on 4 special teams, will you be the same player that you were for beyond those 4 special teams? And I think that's what we had at Wisconsin, guys that bought into something that was larger than themselves. And I think that's why you've seen the success we've had over the last 30 years.
And that's why I want to transition to the coaching staff. And I think whether the conversation we've had on the air or off the air, and Coach Alvarez has talked about this as well, having a depth of coaching staff of people you want to go to, people that you should be connected to. I was saying earlier that maybe the mistake that Luke Fickell made was that he knew Phil Longo from coaching circles, and maybe he got caught up in the name, caught up in the recruiting. Luke Fickell didn't even run an air raid offense at Cincinnati. Obviously, Ohio State didn't run it, so his tree necessarily doesn't run it. So it's one of those things where maybe the mistake was made in recruiting or in hiring his coach by going outside of who he knew and who he was comfortable with. How important is it to have that continuity of vision and personality within a staff, and then how can that carry forward into recruiting and building up this program?
Yeah, I think it's huge to have that, continuity in staff and understanding what you want. No coaching staff operates well in a silo. No coaching staff operates well, if it's ego-driven and not player and product-driven. And I think those are things that you look for. I think you have to welcome difference of opinions. And then once the decision is made, everyone has to be on board. I've been a part of many conversations during my time in Madison and in my professional career where I had a different opinion than some of the other people. But once the decision was made, it was all hands on deck, and it was about what was best for the program, right? So I don't believe you get better without difference of opinions and diversity of opinions as well, from background to what you see and how you see it. The teams that argue the most win a lot of games. The teams that argue the most, we won a lot of games because everyone was heard. But at the end of the day, we put all of that aside for what was better for the program. So I think when we look forward to who our new offensive coordinator needs to be or should be, I've looked at our recruiting profile. I like the profile and sizes of the players that we have. I see Coach Fickell. I mean, we just played the Jets this weekend. He has a lot of Sauce Gardner size guys, 6'1", 6'2" corners. Long guys, but understand when you're on the outside, it's different living on the inside. And so Wisconsin is known for our running backs. We're going to be known for our offensive linemen. And then, as I mentioned earlier, JR, the financial ramifications. And let me just throw a scenario out for you. You're a USC, and you're recruiting a great lineman from Wisconsin. Hey, kid, come out here to the beach. We got a little more NIL money. Come out here to the beach. We got the ladies. We got the stand. We got USC. You can visit Madison when we go back and play them. So how do we counteract that playing devil's advocate? How do we keep these guys in state? So I believe having a plan, like I mentioned earlier, everything we do between now and August 30th, 2025 matters. Are we having these conversations right now? How do we keep these kids in state? How do we offer them? How do we build? And if that's the case, where we lose out because we don't have the financial backing to do certain things, how do we develop the 2 and 3 star like we used to become dominant offensive linemen where 3 or 4 out of our 5 offensive linemen always got drafted, right? All those guys weren't 5-star guys. All those guys weren't 4-star guys. A lot of our drafted guys, J.J. Watt, TJ, a lot of guys were walk-ons. Rest in peace to the walk-on. Now with the new rule where you can't have walk-ons, every scholarship now will be taken care of. So a proud legacy that we had of walk-ons becoming players for us is now over. So now you have to pay every player. How you pay that player, how you navigate the portal, how hard you work at getting guys into the program are going to matter. And yet it seems like hard work, but that's how you win championships. So that work has to be done on the back end. I believe the decisions have to be, there are tough decisions. I'm not going to say that these decisions aren't tough decisions on how you have to navigate the landscape of college athletics, but they are decisions that we have to make as a program and do it the right way.
We got to let you get going here in a second. I'm going to you give me one-word answers out of this. What playbook do you want to see Wisconsin run on offense, like from college football?
Oh, man. Our old playbook.
Okay. All right. The Paul Chryst playbook?
I like the Paul Chryst playbook in the sense of we were always competitive. The defense was already there. Jimmy Leonard was able to do some things with guys. When you have a coach that know how to put guys in the right position, and we say this all the time in the scouting world, don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what he can do, and maximize what the kid can do, right? And I think we were masterful at that. I think when you get a quarterback that's serviceable, you can win on the outside. When you have a development program that can get guys bigger, faster, and stronger, you can win on the outside offensively. Strong corners, you went on the outside defensively, and then our stand-up linebackers. I think I mentioned you earlier when I first logged on, our 3-4 defense was a force. Look at what Nick Herbig and those guys are doing. Look at what Keanu Benton and those guys are doing. Look at what Zach Vaughn is doing on an everyday basis. So the proof is in the pudding of how we develop these guys. And none of these guys were superstar guys when they came to campus. We made them stars, and they made themselves stars by the hard work and dedication that they put in, and they should be very proud of themselves.
Soup, awesome stuff. Really great catching up.
Really great catching up with you guys, JR, man. We got a big one this week, brother, so wishing you guys the best of luck. Badger fans, always a Badger. You guys be safe. Glad you guys had me on.
All right, that's Lamar Soup Campbell, former Badger. Thanks to him for joining the show. I believe Kelly Sheffield is on Mr. Irrelevant tomorrow, so make sure to tune in for that. But you can catch me later today on Jim, Matt, and Molly. This has been The Jump Around 3.0.